I'm very focused on building a company that's focused on people. I'm a firm believer that if you don't get the people side of the business right, you're not going to get anything else right within your organization.
Welcome to Multifamily Excellence, the podcast that explores the ever-evolving world of the multifamily industry. I'm your host, Jonathan Treble. In each episode, I'll spend time with a world-class multifamily leader to learn how they're continuously pushing boundaries for excellence. You'll get to hear their perspectives on career progression, leadership philosophies, and strategies for operational excellence. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Multifamily Excellence. This episode is brought to you by my company, With Me. With Me makes people's lives better every day through convenient, technology-enabled solutions for the multifamily apartment industry and beyond. Today, we have the pleasure of diving into the world of multifamily leadership with Jennifer Staciokas, the president of Western Wealth Communities and VP of People and Technology at Western Wealth Capital. Jennifer has been in the multifamily industry for nearly 25 years and has held a number of impactful roles at industry leaders such as Lincoln Property Company, now known as Willowbridge, and Pinnacle Property Management, now known as Cushman & Wakefield. Focusing on numerous areas of property performance, she has been responsible for as many as 200,000 units at one time. In 2020, she spearheaded the launch of Western Wealth Communities, building the management arm for Western Wealth Capital from zero to over 17,000 units in less than 2 years. In 2023, her role expanded to oversee strategic direction for Western Wealth Capital's People and Technology departments. Jennifer is the recipient of numerous leadership awards, including the Globe Street Women of Influence Award in both 2016 and 2021. And more recently, she has earned a spot on the Arizona Big Media Women Leaders list. She also won Executive of the Year Award in 2022 for the Arizona Multi-Housing Association, known as the AMA. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
It's truly a pleasure. And you're somebody that I have known in the industry almost since I entered the industry. And you are somebody that is so well respected widely for your collaboration with folks and your generosity of your time with, I know, other vendors like myself, but also with peers and the associations and learning and development. So on behalf of all of us vendors, thank you for being so warm and welcoming to us.
Well, thank you. You guys make us better. So that's certainly, the motivation behind it is great partnerships are what make great companies. So pleased to be here.
Excellent. Well, our podcast, Multifamily Excellence, seeks to uncover the unique stories of our exemplary multifamily leaders in this industry, and you certainly have a unique one. So to set the stage for our listeners, I'd love to dive into your career trajectory, starting all the way back in the beginning, when you first entered the multifamily industry. So can you tell us, starting there, and maybe even going a little bit before that, to how you started your career after college, that journey, and then what first attracted you to multifamily?
Absolutely. So my story is not extremely unique as I meet more and more people, but how I got into, I guess, after college, I was a French major, which I thought I had a different trajectory on where my career was going to go being a French major. And I knew that my ultimate goal after I graduated was to go back to graduate school and study international business. And so I took a job in Washington, D.C., which is where I wanted to live after college. And I knew it was a temporary thing while I was gaining residency in the state of Virginia, so I could go back to graduate school, and took a job as a research assistant at a pharmaceutical company. And it was a great experience, made some great lifelong friends through that experience, but knew that that was going to be something that was temporary. And so when I got accepted into graduate school, I was coming back from work that day, and in the elevator of the apartment community where I lived, there was a flyer saying, looking for fun, enthusiastic people that want to save money on their rent. And I felt like it was a sign, as many things in life truly are. And I went into the leasing office, applied for the job, and was hired on the spot. And that is really what kicked off my multifamily career. So, what I thought was going to be a temporary job for a year and a half while I went to grad school at night turned into a 25-year career plus, hopefully, many more years in the industry as well. But I fell in love with leasing and then became an assistant manager, managed a site, and then got tapped on the shoulder from somebody who thought that I would be really good in a training capacity. And so I took a job in our regional office as a trainer, and just a lot of opportunities presented themselves. I'm a firm believer that you definitely have to put in the hard work, but there's also timing and a little bit of luck that play into things. And somebody was staying home with their children. And so it gave me an opportunity to take on more responsibility. And then somebody else that I worked with ended up deciding to stay home with their children, and I was tapped on the shoulder to take on the marketing role as well. And I think that's a common theme throughout my career is that either somebody has seen something in me and asked me to take on additional responsibility, or as I got further on in my career, actually raising my hand and saying, I see that there's a need and I want to take that challenge on.
Hmm. That is still a interesting story, right? And I have heard variants of that story before, right? Leasing agent all the way up into executive ranks, but I think it's still unique, and every path is a little bit different there.
Mhm.
But if they were looking for friendly and enthusiastic, they nailed it with you, huh?
I guess so, right? I got hired on the spot. I mean, the criteria was pretty slim, but I met it.
And did you ever regret not pursuing the international business route?
Yes and no. So certainly I have a passion still for foreign language. I was a French major. I also took a lot of classes in German. So something that people may not know is when you're a foreign language major, you're not just allowed to focus on one language. You actually have to have competency in another language. And so during high school and actually into middle school, I had taken both languages. And it was something I was really passionate about. And it was something that came very easy to me. And I find we end up putting a lot of effort towards things, right, that come easy and that we enjoy. And so language was something that was certainly there. And then I knew as I was graduating with a French degree and my parents reminding me, like, what exactly are you going to do with that? That I needed to also branch out. And so going back to graduate school and tying in the love of language, the love of travel with the business component, I knew would definitely pay dividends for me. And one thing I always say too is that yes, I got a French degree and maybe I'm not utilizing French in my day to day. However, I became a lot better in English because of being a foreign language major. And I do also think that just any education that you can get to further yourself is beneficial. So, regardless if you end up using the major that you focused on or not, it's still a learning experience. And another great experience when you're a foreign language major is basically to be able to graduate with a major in a foreign language, you have to study abroad. I'm not sure
Mm.
there's anybody out there that you can actually stay stateside and get that foreign language experience without doing that. And
Mm.
to me, I was talking to a colleague yesterday. It's one of the most rewarding experiences when you have a chance to study abroad, but it's also an opportunity to mature quickly because you're living overseas, right? I was traveling or moving from the East Coast to France, and you don't have the safety net of your parents being right down the street or
Mm.
just a drive away. And you're creating a whole new set of friends and friends that don't speak English as their first language. It
Mm.
also teaches you how to manage your money and be responsible and how to budget. And
Yeah.
so there's so many great rewards beyond just the education that I saw in my career and my life.
Right. I totally understand, and I would agree. My study abroad experience, and I studied in Israel, was eye-opening, and the travel from there to other countries was really valuable to open my aperture a bit on the whole world. I We intend that many of the listeners of this podcast will be folks in our industry who are
Mhm.
earlier in their career, and I suppose many of them would not have had that experience to study abroad. Do you have any advice to them if they miss that opportunity on how to maybe make up for that?
Yeah, it's not too late, right? And so the world is a big place and finding opportunity anywhere. So There's a lot of co-op programs or even things where you can go for a semester or for a summer. When I was in graduate school, I had the opportunity of spending the summer in England, and that was also a great experience where we also got to travel to Switzerland and work through the World Trade Organization through some internship programs. So there's opportunity, I think, everywhere, and just having a curious mind and wanting to seek new adventures out, be it
Mhm.
within the States or abroad. I think there's certainly opportunity there.
Right. Interesting. Well, let's go back to your career path once you entered multifamily. I know you touched on it, but you did get promoted fairly swiftly through the ranks at first. And what was it? Lincoln at the time, Lincoln Property Company. Was that your first job, and then where you stayed? I think for 15 years, right?
It sure was. Yeah, it was my
Wow.
first job in multifamily. So I was in my early 20s and had the great opportunity to work for some really great leaders. But there was one RVP that I ended up working for about 7.5 years. And I like to say that he took a chance on me, right? He knew that I was, had some education and I had the drive. And I certainly had the will to want to succeed. And he is from Texas originally, and he calls it sickum, right? Somebody that just can go after things and
Mm.
chase goals, chase dreams. And he said that he saw that in me. And so
Mm.
he really was my sponsor throughout the early part of my career where I wasn't in the room being able to advocate for myself, but he was in the room advocating for me, my capabilities, and the skills that I brought to the table. And he was instrumental in allowing me to get promoted through the ranks in Lincoln and
Mm.
ended up taking on a national job and moved to Dallas. But he was my biggest champion, and he was the one that was sharing the success and the results that we were seeing within our region and how that could translate into a national level. And then at the same time, I had somebody who was in the role that I ended up taking her position when she decided to stay home with her children, who was also very passionate about finding a succession plan and then working with me throughout time to make sure that I was ready to step into that role when she was ready to step out and be with her family.
Right. Well, yeah, that I can relate to that, having a leader, a mentor who will push you, who will coach you, and then also put you in positions to expand yourself because they believe in you. Any advice to folks early in our industry who maybe they haven't found that person yet? What's the best way to, I know it's hard to manufacture those relationships at times,
Mhm.
but are there viable paths to find somebody like that?
I think absolutely. And, with the rise of social media, back when I was starting my career, we didn't have any of these networking opportunities through LinkedIn and social media. But now you can start following influencers on LinkedIn. Jonathan, you do a great job of posting leadership posts and things that can inspire and motivate people in our side of the business. And there's a lot of other people just like you who are posting those things, putting themselves out there and becoming available to be a guide and a mentor. So I think social media is a great way to see that. And then within your own organization, if there's somebody that you look up to or you really respect the way that they handle situations, that's the person where ask them if they'll meet you for a coffee or you can sit in the break room and talk about things. Maybe you don't have an in-office opportunity, but it could be setting up something over Teams or Zoom to get to know them better and then ask some advice and being curious about what they do, how they got to where they are, and what other things could they raise their hand for to be in a position that they're in.
That's such a great point. And it's not an obvious one that now with LinkedIn, there are so many ways to connect with folks in our industry,
Right.
even outside of your company. And I'll have to say, as much as I post and I've built a bit of a followership in our industry, I rarely get younger folks reaching out, and I'm still like in the middle of my career. But I rarely get people reaching out asking for advice that aren't in my company. And I think
Hmm.
that just shows it's an underutilized avenue. It's unsaturated. And I still believe in the power of a cold message or cold email. And I've
Yeah.
hired many people that way. But it's truly, in my experience, I don't know about yours, Jennifer, but for me, it's rare to get a really thoughtful cold email from somebody that just wants advice without
Right.
another agenda or is really curious, wants to intern for you. That like it's super rare in my experience.
It is. Yeah. And I think another way to get your name out there and also find potential sponsors, mentors, etc., is my advice is to raise your hand and offer to speak on panels. If you get asked to participate in a podcast or a webinar, do it, but also only do it on those topics that you feel comfortable discussing and that you really
Mhm.
are that subject matter expert on. I do sometimes see people that are younger in their career saying yes to every opportunity to speak when maybe it's not within their wheelhouse. Again, defining what it is that you're really good at and that what you want to be known for, and then put your name out there and volunteer for those types of opportunities and align yourself with people that can put you in the room to get you those opportunities as well.
Good advice. Are there any moments thinking back on your career up until now, and I'm sure there probably are, but what are like the decision points that you had to make that were somewhat pivotal, and maybe it was you reached a fork in a road or an
Yeah.
opportunity presented itself that like created a whole new path for you? Were there any moments that you want to talk about that could be informative for the audience?
Absolutely. I think there's a couple examples of that. So the first was, as you mentioned, I had been with Lincoln for 15 years. And now looking back, that's a really short tenure for a lot of people that have been there and spent maybe 40 or 50 years of their career there. But I also knew, I would say I absolutely enjoyed and loved my time working at Lincoln. When I look back on the foundation of my knowledge in property management, it all ties back to the lessons I learned from Fred Cheney and Scott Wilder, people that put in the time to mentor and train and make sure that we understood the foundation of what we stood for. So that was really pivotal. But I also knew that I didn't necessarily want to be somebody that was there for the rest of my life. And after you've been somewhere for 15 years, sometimes people overlook you for opportunities because they think you'll never leave.
Mm.
And I had the opportunity with Pinnacle where Rick, the CEO, had asked me, hey, we're a longstanding company, but the one area that we haven't focused on yet is really what your sweet spot is, marketing and training. Would you ever have an interest in coming and building out that platform for our organization? And to be quite frank, it was a 9-month discussion that went on because I was really hesitant of leaving the culture that I loved, the team that I had built, and the platform that we had built together at Lincoln. But I also knew that I wanted to see if I could do it again. Somebody once told me that people that leave Lincoln have a really hard time being successful in their next role because they're so used to the great culture that exists within that organization. And so it was almost a challenge to me where I wanted to see, okay, could I do this again? Could I replicate what I had done at Lincoln, but actually maybe even make it better? And
Mm.
that was really the driving force is that, in my career, when you're going to make a change in an organization or in a new role, I don't ever want to take something that's not a challenge. So if I'm going to leave where I'm at and where I'm happy at, it's going to be because I'm taking on some big challenge. And that was what lay ahead at Pinnacle and ended up being such a great experience where, again, I was able to build the platform of technology. I was able to build the team, which was a really impressive team. And then in addition to that, had the opportunity to help launch 3 of the brands that Pinnacle rolled out while I was there. So a student housing business, a New York City centric business, as well as a Canadian business. And so to me, those were 3 opportunities that I may not have had at other organizations. And then I think the next pivotal moment in my career came when Cushman and Wakefield purchased Pinnacle. I wasn't looking to leave, but the day that press release went out, I was contacted by a recruiter, and it seemed like an opportunity that was a lifetime opportunity and one that if I didn't pursue it, I was going to look back and regret a couple years from then, and I didn't want to have regret. And so ended up going through the interview process, and it was at the company where I'm at now. It was Western Wealth Capital looking to bring management in-house and building out a property management platform for their organization. And it was a really unique opportunity to be able to build it from scratch. And again, build a platform, but on a larger scale beyond property performance. So beyond marketing, training, corporate marketing, revenue management, but also encompassing day to day ops, HR, IT, et cetera. And so took that opportunity, and it's something that I will never regret because it was a startup environment. We were growing rapidly. Like you mentioned at the beginning, from 0 units to 17,000 units in just under 2 years. And we were doing that all while we were building the foundation of the management company. And then to layer on top of that, it was also during COVID. So I started at the organization in March of 2020 when lockdown had happened. And I sometimes say that that was to our benefit because I was working out of my bedroom at a desk, and we had less than 30 days to roll out the first 10 communities to bring them in house. And that meant setting up all the technology, all of the systems. And quite frankly, if we had to be in person doing that, I don't think we could have accomplished it because there would have been so many distractions. Instead, it was my home office in my bedroom for about 16 or so hours a day, cranking out what needed to be done so we could be successful and have the foundation of our business set.
Wow. Just so I make sure I understand that, that was 10 properties live on your own technology stack within 30 days of joining?
Correct. And
Wow.
that goes back to, Jonathan, you mentioned about our supplier partners and you thanked me for the relationships and all of that. But it goes to show when you give back to your supplier partners, when you provide advice, when you provide feedback, and you want to be a trusted partner, they will also in turn bend over backwards for you. And I had to ask for a lot of favors during that startup phase because a normal integration may take 60 days or 90 days to launch some of these products. And in many cases, we had 21 days. And I had supplier partners that were willing to do the full implementation for me, where we were setting up our learning management system, and the supplier partner offered to do all of the setup as long as I gave some minor details that needed to be loaded. They did a lot of the heavy lifting. And again, it goes back to creating really strong partnerships with everybody that you encounter and earning the respect of the people that you work with and that you work for. And it will pay dividends in your career. And I'm certainly a prime example of that in setting up this company.
Wow, that's remarkable. I've heard of other ownership groups bringing management in-house, but I'm sure they almost always do it on a longer timeline, and it's still difficult from what I hear. So for the fact that you pulled it off in 30 days is remarkable, and then it grew from there quite exponentially, right? Yeah,
It did.
so, and is the vision for the management arm to solely manage for the ownership group, or is it also to manage for third-party
Yeah, as of
owners?
today, our goals are still to manage for the ownership group. But again, I think like all of us, if we decide that we want to pivot in the future, we're setting up the foundation where we would be able to do that if we so choose.
Now, I know of a few people going through this, bring management in-house. I just know personally some people doing projects like that. Any key, besides the one you mentioned already, having strong supplier relationships and asking for favors, are there any lessons you learned, maybe the hard way, or any top pieces of advice you'd have for people that are going through that transition?
We could spend hours talking about the lessons I learned. But I think one thing is utilize your network, right? You can't be an expert in everything, and use the phone a friend. I did
Mhm.
that on many occasions, and there's many people that I've come across throughout my career that played a really big part in helping answer questions, just settle debates, etc., in order to move forward. So use your lifelines. Make sure you have that strong network of industry experts in various areas that you can use them to bounce ideas off of and validate things that you're thinking. And so that was really critical in setting up the company. The other thing I would say, when you're in startup mode, you have to act fast. You can't belabor, and you have to make decisions quickly. You have to have all the facts in order to do it, but you have to make decisions quickly and you have to move on. And also, you cannot allow perfection to get in the way of good enough. When you're in a startup and you're moving so fast, sometimes you've just got to get something out, knowing that you'll go back and fix the foundation if needed. But sometimes good enough truly is good enough.
I completely agree. Yeah. Perfect is the enemy of good, right? Or good enough.
Yes.
And Yeah. Wow. It's just a remarkable transition that you made there and remarkable growth for that management arm. Now, after a couple of years focused solely on the management arm, I know you were asked to take on a second role, I think with the ownership group, and your title there is VP of People and Technology. Can you talk about what it's like to be doing both for two separate entities at the same time?
Sure. And so it was kind of a natural progression because I was overseeing people and technology within the management company as well. And those are the two areas that I really gravitate towards, right? I'm very focused on building a company that's focused on people. I'm a firm believer that if you don't get the people side of the business right, you're not going to get anything else right within your organization. And then I think there's also a beautiful tie between people and technology. And so I've always like to be on the leading edge of technology. Doesn't always mean I'm the first one to roll things out, but I like to be in the know and understand what the landscape looks like. And where there's a place to be the pioneer, I certainly have done that in my career. And then when there's a chance to be the follower, I've certainly done that as well after analyzing data to figure out what's going to be right for the portfolio. But that match has been really nice. And I think it's also what really drives me and within our organization is understanding that yes, we're a technology first organization, but we also are a people first organization. And there's a fine line between what can be replaced by technology and what still has to have the human touch. And that's where I really focus our team and making sure that we're setting our directive on how we're still keeping the human touch with our residents and our supplier partners, but also leveraging technology on the items that are just creating noise within the organization. So to me, it was just another natural progression of how we could bring all of that together within the investment company and the management company.
Interesting. And so, how many professionals now work at both entities?
So we have a little over 270 team members across the entire organization.
Wow. And the Western Wealth Capital side is what like a traditional asset management team would look like, I'm guessing.
Correct. Yeah. So we
Okay.
have our investor relations, we have our acquisitions team, as well as asset management and construction management.
Okay. Got it. Well, with overseeing people and technology, you're at the center of all the buzzwords right now: centralization, AI. Any anything that you think is under, like, there's a lot of buzz right now, but any views on like what is being ignored that about these things that should be paid more attention to?
Yeah, I think the big thing as it relates to centralization is focusing on the maintenance side of things. So we did the easy tasks first. We centralized our admin or a lot of the functions that are taking place between move-ins, move-outs, renewals, etc. And our next big thing to tackle will be the maintenance side of the shop. And really that's where we've had a lot of us that stay up, gets ended up staying up at night worrying about things. It has to do with maintenance and not necessarily with the existing maintenance that we have employed for us because they're incredible. The problem is we're seeing there's not a lot of young people that are wanting to join the industry and find their path within maintenance. So we have a couple of teams. An example here in Phoenix is we bought a deal in December of 2020 and we were fortunate enough to be able to keep the maintenance team on staff. And many of them, I think the three employees, the shortest tenure that any of them has on that property is 13 years,
Wow.
which is incredible. And so 13 years of three gentlemen working together, they know the ins and outs of the property. They know the residents very well and how to support the residents. And they also know how to be skilled at doing their job, to fix appliances, to work on AC, to work on the pools. And there's not a whole lot of surprises because they have a great working relationship together. So our industry's definitely gotten away from a lot of those relationships where you have teams that have worked together for so long and have been doing the job for so long. And so, I think our charge as an industry is to find that next pipeline of talent to get them motivated and excited about maintenance and provide a career path so they see that there is potential there.
Hmm. I've heard that widely about the lack of maintenance labor.
Yeah.
I have to think it must be easier for an owner operator like yourselves to handle centralization than it would be for a strict fee manager, right? Because of issues with maybe conflict between two different owners, allocation of time, billing back. Does that give you, I'm sure it does give you an advantage, but any ideas about how maybe fee management companies could maybe make centralization possible among distinct ownership groups?
Sure. I think the other layer too that makes it difficult for fee managers is various systems, right? So you have different ownership groups that require you to utilize different property
Mhm.
management software, different vendors that they're utilizing. So that adds an extra layer of complexity. To my advice would be find a pilot that you can do. If there's a particular ownership group that's pretty forward thinking in their mentality, pitch the idea to them, what your proposal is, and then let them know these are the metrics that we're going to measure. This is the time frame that we're going to take, and then we'll circle back as a team. One thing that we did when we rolled it out is that we call it enhanced services. We don't call it centralization. Our team thought that that was a much nicer approach to centralization.
Mhm.
And they created what was called a leakage report for me. So they were able to monetize the areas where they were able to capture money that the on site teams just either got sidetracked, lost track of, or maybe just didn't want to have the conflict with the residents. So they were reversing out charges.
Mhm.
And what we found is we were able to bill those charges back per the lease agreement and create what was called our leakage report. So we truly could see how much money we captured by rolling out this initiative. And I think if you can then find the partner up front that's willing to take the risk with you, be very explicit on what data you're going to be measuring and within what time frame, and then schedule that meeting, show the results, and then hopefully those results are going to show that it is an absolute no-brainer to move forward and to also charge a portion of that back to the property because you're taking some of those tasks off of the on-site team and putting them into a corporate environment.
Interesting. Well, we're entering the final part of our episode. I can't believe an hour has moved by so quickly, or close to an hour. I have a few questions that are going to be geared toward our up and comers in the industry, advice style questions. If you're okay with that, Jennifer, I'll just jump in.
Of course.
You've talked a lot about your career across Lincoln, Pinnacle, now Western Wealth. If you had to distill your experiences and wisdom into just one most important piece of advice for our listeners, what would that be?
So, one thing I would say is listen more than you speak. It's so important to be very observant and to truly listen sincerely to what people are saying and utilizing that within your memory, either if you have a really good memory or writing those things down about the people that you talk to, things that are important to them, ways that they want to grow or ways that they want to expand. So you can then remember those ideas and opportunities and present them back to them when an opportunity does arise.
Well said. Next question is, if you had to pick a single source of learning in the industry, what would you recommend folks do to learn as best as they can?
To learn about the industry, there's several different avenues. Some great conferences to attend are NAA or the NMHC OpTech conference. I find a lot of value in following many people on LinkedIn and seeing what they're posting, attending webinars, etc. And then I think a lot of areas where I've really grown from a leadership perspective is looking outside of the industry. One thing that's really been a life changer to me is a book that I read every morning called The Daily Stoic. And it's an idea for every day of the year. And I've been reading this now for, I don't even know, maybe 8 or 10 years. And whenever the book first came out, and there's certain days that the message just hits because you really needed to hear it. And then maybe the next year on today's date, that message won't resonate like it did this year. But there's always days and things that I go back to when I'm struggling with things within my team, struggling with things within myself, that I go back and reread and refocus because you have to be open to learning every single day and knowing that you don't know it all and being teachable.
Mm, well said. I'll have to check that book out. And last question, What set of skills do you feel is underrepresented today in our industry, in the corporate setting? Where would you like to see more professionals building strength over the next 5 to 10 years?
Absolutely. The area, and I think this is a lot due to COVID, is communications. So people got used to being in their own homes and not interacting face to face with people as much. And I've seen a deterioration in communication where people want to hide behind a chat or a text or an email instead of picking up the phone. And so either having an in-person meeting or picking up the phone. And that's one of the first things I will say to my team members when they're having conflict with somebody is pick up the phone, go down to somebody's office and talk through it and be humble about how you could have played a part in the conflict as well and lead with that. Hey, Jonathan, I sense there's tension between us and I'd like to know, is there something that I did or said that has made you upset? And I'd really like to talk about it because I certainly don't want that tension to exist between the two of us. And I think just level setting relationships, dealing with conflict before it escalates into something that is truly really big, and then utilizing and leveraging communication to build and forge relationships that can withstand the good and the bad in an organization.
One thing you mentioned in that answer, I'll just do a follow-up, is walking down to somebody's office. And I think it's no surprise most of the listeners would probably be aware that I think at the corporate level, most professionals seem to be back in the office, at least some days a week. Do you foresee that trend continuing? Do you think our industry will become more hybrid over years to come, even at the corporate level? Or do you think that we're going to see even more shift back to the way things were before COVID?
I think it's changed. I do see some companies that have gone 100% back in office, and there are a few outliers I feel like that have gone fully remote. But my belief is that hybrid is here to stay and being flexible with that. And I do think the change in our industry moving forward is also to find ways where maybe the offices are going to be a little bit more flexible and that there can be some form of hybrid approach where we're pulling resources together from maintenance, leasing, et cetera, to manage the tasks at a higher level.
Well said. I think that all makes sense. Well, Jennifer, thank you again so much for joining me on the podcast. I really appreciate your time. And if anybody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do so?
Absolutely. Look me up on LinkedIn and shoot me a direct message and happy to connect.
All right. And for the listeners, Jennifer's title and full spelling and Western Wealth will be in the podcast notes, so you can find her on LinkedIn. And believe me when I say she will be happy to connect. Have a great day, Jennifer.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Multifamily Excellence, brought to you by With Me. With Me is making lives better every day through convenient, technology-enabled amenities for the multifamily industry and beyond. If you like this episode, make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.